This example is going to be the beginning of a reflection transformation. So remember, when you are working on a reflection, it's the stencil that I think is the trickiest to make, because you cut it out and then you flip it and then you slide it. So I will show you that, because I'm going to use the stencil that I've already drawn. Remember, going from corner to corner, corner to corner, just because then that way when I am flipping everything, it just makes it easier. So the first thing I'm going to do is, again, cut everything out very neatly and very carefully, because I'm using both parts of what I am cutting. So I do want to make sure that I don't obliterate either part here. So curves are tricky. They are kind of hard to cut. They are kind of hard to work with at times. But I do encourage you, if you feel up to that challenge, go ahead and throw a curve in there. You are not required to, but it can definitely create a nice pattern. So then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it up, and I'm going to go ahead and flip it this way. So flip. And flip. Sorry, I showed you wrong the first time. Which could be another reason why it's helpful to have writing on it, because you shouldn't be able to read the writing. And I'm going to slide it across, and I'm going to slide it down. And then those pieces are ready to put together. So again, I'm going to make sure that everything lines up very carefully. I'm going to tape it down once again with some masking tape, so that you guys can see the tape that I am using, so you see where it goes. Line it up really carefully on this side also. Tape it down. You may have a couple little gaps, like how you can see I've got a small little gap here. It's okay, just try to keep them as minimal as you can. It's usually just because you have drawn the pattern, the design by hand. If you want to try to get rid of those gaps even more, you can use a ruler. But that will only help you on straight edges, so it's not really that beneficial, unless you just really want your edges to be perfectly straight. So again, I'm just going to cover up sort of all of my seam, or as much of it as I can, so that my stencil is nice and strong. And then I'm going to go ahead and start tracing that onto my paper. Again, I'm going to line so that I have a straight line along the edge, just because that's my preference. It's not required. You could just plunk your stencil smack in the middle of the paper and start. That would be perfectly fine. I'm going to trace very carefully. As usual, get every single little detail in there. And then I would be sliding it, but I'd be flipping it. Because remember, this is a reflection. So instead of just going across or rotating, what we're going to be doing is taking this, and we're literally just going to be flipping it. I always get a little mixed up on how I'm flipping it, but you'll be able to tell because the edges will match up. They will interlock. So then I'm going to be flipping it again, back to my original direction. So then that would be sort of one row. I'll scooch in so you can see that a little bit better. That's just my first row of the reflection tessellation. As you can see, I've got my stencil here in this direction, and then here I've got it flipped, and then I flip it again. So you're just going to be flipping it back and forth the whole way. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this one out so you can see the rest of the process here. So then the same thing is true here. Because I have it this way up here, what I'm going to be doing is flipping it in that bottom half. That can be a helpful way to make sure that you are getting started correctly on the second layer or the second row. Oops. Slid it off a little bit. So just going to line it back up. Continue tracing. And it was a little hard to see the tracing in the video, the actual tracing process. And then I'm going to flip it again. Trace it. So you're going to have different amounts of lines. And then I didn't flip it this time because what I'm doing is taking it from here and it's already been flipped. So kind of like with the rotation example, once you get a couple of them on there, it does become sort of a pattern and sort of a game of just figuring out exactly where everything goes within that space. Treating it like a puzzle, just kind of overlapping and interlocking until you make sure that the pattern does match completely. And then I'm just going to double check to make sure there's no other lines I have to add, because a lot of times there will be, such as right here. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side, just double check, nothing to add on that side, and then I just have to move it up to the top. Remember, I'm going to have to flip it here, and then put it in that place. Make sure it's lined up, and then go over that outlining. Sorry, I'm kind of off your page here. So all I did for that one, I'll just tell you again since you didn't get to see it, was I took this and I flipped it and put it here. And then just traced a little bit of it that was showing, and then it would flip back, and then I'd flip it again to be able to do this last one. So again, that one's not going to be very much. So then my next step is going to be, once again, to go ahead and outline. This time I'm going to use a thicker Sharpie, just so that you can see that there are different options and it's okay to use different ones. I'm going to actually use a dark bluish purple. And the same thing that I did last time, I'm going to sort of connect my lines across so that I create sort of a seamless pattern. I'm going to use a ruler this time. Once again, just to emphasize that you do have options. So you'll see that in here, the lines got a little bit off. So what I'm going to do is use my straight edge to kind of just even them up a little bit. Basically, I'm drawing that line sort of in between the two. And I'm just going to do all my straight lines first, just as a matter of preference. I'm going to turn the page here so it's easier for me. Just continuing to finish up those straight lines. And once again, remember, it's not necessary that you use a ruler, but it can be helpful, especially with a pattern like this where I am sort of correcting some of my gaps as I go. it can be very helpful to be using a ruler for that. Just going to continue going over those lines. And I'm not going to use a ruler for these, even though I definitely could. Simply because I've got some wavy lines in this pattern as well. And I think it'll be kind of a better combination to have less with the ruler, since those wavy lines are such a big part of this pattern. But like I said, anytime you want to use a ruler because your line is straight, that's totally fine. Definitely feel free to do that. And once again, I am still just going to finish all of my straight lines with or without a ruler first, because for me it's kind of a mindset shift between working on straight lines and curved lines. So I tend to do all of one and then all of the other. And again, there's no real right or wrong as to whichever way you choose to do that. So now I'm just going to go ahead and go over my curved lines. I'm going to go nice and slow. I'm going to do this in one fell swoop. And then this one. So one thing that really helps with curved lines, especially larger curved lines like these, is if you move your entire arm, not just your wrist. So if you were behind me watching me, you would see that my entire arm from the shoulder down is moving along slowly. You can also pick it up, especially when you get to a point like that, and treat each part of the curve separately. For some people that can be a little bit easier, especially if you have sort of a meeting point, like another line to be able to pick up and leave off. For other people, doing it all at once is easier. Figure out what works best for you and then stick with that. So once again, remember this is a reflection where I'm going to be going in one direction, and then I literally just flip. So you're going to be flipping, 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 flipping your stencil over and over. And remember that when you are creating that reflection, you're going to cut it out, and then you're going to flip it, and you're going to flip it, and then slide it over, and then slide it down. So one thing, like I said, that helps is if you write down to flip on the parts you're cutting out, so that then when you flip it, just make sure that you cannot read those words anymore, and that will help you make sure that you flip it in the correct direction.